세계문학 포럼.
So the World Humanities Forum, Busan, special session with the invited lecture. I welcome you all to this lecture. I am your MC. My name is Yongjun Park. It's a pleasure to be with you. Before we begin the session, I'd like to have some short announcements. Please switch your phones to mobile phones to silent mode. And if you are using the interpretation receivers on Korean, for Korean, you will get it on channel 1 and English on channel 2.
Put channel number 2 for English. 네, 그리고 끝나고 나면
And afterwards, we will have the closing ceremony, and there's a musical gala performance prepared for your enjoyment. I hope that you will stay with us throughout the closing ceremony. And the last lecture of the event will be given by Professor Ken Na at IDAS at Hongik University on humanistic approach to the urban assets of Busan, and we will also have a Q&A session after the lecture. So Professor Hong is professor at the International Design School of Advanced Studies at Hongik University, and he was also the general director at the Gwangju Biennale, which closed yesterday. And he is also an educator at the Red Dot Award, and he is also a director since 1 week ago at the WTO. So we would like to speak about the competitive assets of Busan for the future and what are the solutions for maximizing the potential assets of Busan based on humanistic perspectives. He'll be speaking about design. I'd like to invite Professor Ken Na to the stage with a warm round of applause.
예, 반갑습니다.
Good afternoon. I hope you enjoyed your lunch. And usually, time slot right after lunch break is not popular among lecturers, but that's what I'm given. So for the next hour, I will talk about a humanistic approach to the urban assets in Busan. I didn't choose this title. Actually, I asked the organizers what title might be desirable, and they suggested something similar to the title, and I accepted it. So as introduced, I am Professor Ken Na at Hongik University. So I'm quite far from the humanities. I'm a hardcore engineer because I majored in industrial engineering, and I have a master's degree in human engineering, which is a subfield of industrial engineering, so that bears some resemblance to the humanities. But also for my PhD degree, I studied industrial design. So I think that out of all the professors at the design school, I guess I was one of the first professor who majored in engineering. But other engineering students followed my path later on. Today, I want to talk about Busan, the city of Busan. And actually, I'm born and raised in Seoul. And my family also been living inside the 4 gates in Seoul area. So very close to, at the center of the old capital. So that's what I kept hearing from my father growing up. So going outside Seoul, for me, my very first trip outside Seoul was my high school field trip to Gyeongju City. And later, I once failed a university entrance exam, so I had to study for 1 more year. And I went to a private academy in Jongno area in Seoul. And there, I met many friends from Busan. So the competition was quite fierce, even to enter that private academy in Jongno. And there were quite a dozen of Busan students within my class at the private academy. And then when they were like talking to each other, I was shocked by their language. You know, I studied overseas. Even when I was studying overseas, I didn't get such a shock from other languages. But between these 2 Busan friends, when they were talking, I thought they were fighting against each other. And then I thought that they're about to punch each other. But then they didn't punch each other, but then they seemed to be having a very heated argument. But then they went back to their seat, and then they acted as if nothing happened, that they were not fighting. And after that, and also after I got used to the Busan language, I finally understood that, oh, this is just the way they talk. And then later, I had a chance to come to Busan, of course, and now I'm kind of I'm able to decipher the Busan accent. But I also love Busan as a city. So as an outsider, but who loves Busan, I want to talk about Busan, and I want to propose some ideas, share my ideas about how to expand the assets in Busan. The Busan CI changed at the end of last year, so I took a look at it, and also I kind of became a designer for Busan City. So maybe when I retire from school, maybe I should come to live here. I'm discussing that with my wife. So as I was studying about Busan city, if you look at the Chinese characters of Busan, Bu means rich, and but it's a city. It also has other districts under Busan city, and also there are about population of 3.3 million. It's the second largest city in Korea. And also, this is kind of a history of Busan. So during the King Gyeongdeok, during the Silla dynasty, it was designated as Dongnae-gun. Later, it became Dongnae-bu. During the Japanese colonial rule, it became Busan-bu. And then during the First Republic, it became Busan City. Later, Busan Special City, and in 1995, Busan Metropolitan City. And Busan became what it is today after this tragic time in the Korean history. So in 1915, June 25th, at dawn, 4 a.m., the Korean War began with a surprise attack by North Korea. So a lot of North Korean army actually ended up taking most part of South Korea except this small corner, including Busan. And then during the war period, Busan was the temporary capital. So back then, about 0.3 million population was living in Busan, and a lot of war refugees left their hometown and came to live in Seoul during the wartime. So the population grew to about 1 million during the wartime. A lot of scholars and academia, and including my wife's family, they moved to Busan. So this is actually, this part has a lot of important implications for what Busan is today and what Busan could be in the future. So why is a city important? Well, I went to visit Tokyo last week. We say I'm going to Tokyo. We don't say I'm going to Japan. We say I'm going to Tokyo or Osaka or Fukuoka. We don't say I'm going to Japan. So cities are more important in people's mind. Urban competitiveness is going to be more important. In the 1950s, about 30% of the world population were living in urban areas, but by 2050, the urban population will take up 70% of the whole population on Earth. So cities are going to only expand. We have a major cities in Korea as well, really huge city in Seoul, second largest city in Busan, and maybe some other major cities. Then they will take up most of the Korean population. And Robert Muga is a politician. He said that if the 19th and 20th centuries were the era of a state, the 21st century is going to be the era of cities. So that's how important cities are going to be in the future. And also, we often jokingly say in Seoul that there are only two cities in Korea. So if I say that jokingly to my foreign friend, then they ask me. So my answer is Seoul and others. But if I come to Busan, I tell this joke that there are only three cities in Korea: Seoul, Busan, and other cities. And if I go to other cities like Gwangju, I say there are only three cities: so Seoul, Gwangju, and other cities. So it really goes to show that a lot is concentrated in Seoul in Korea. So how can we reduce the concentration level in Seoul, and how can we spread the overdevelopment in other areas in Korea? Recently, we're talking about place making. This is quite a trendy topic. So Fred Kent is a scholar who studies cities, and he coined this term, place making. So by making a place, you can attract a lot of people. And which can lead to a lot of economic activities, so more opportunities to make a living, and basically generally more opportunities in life. So placemaking is now a very hot topic and hot keyword nowadays. So in the context of Busan, what kind of spots or locations are we going to put to placemaking? So, for example, we could redevelop currently undervalued places, and then we can value up that place and then sell it at a higher price. It's like oftentimes we talk about that in urban development. So, placemaking is really important. In Seoul, there are some traditional famous spots. For example, my school, Hongik University, is really famous spot. But the area around my school is completely different from what it used to be in 20 years ago. 20 years ago, I think there was a lot of good placemaking in Hongik area. But as this area got developed, the rent also went up a lot. So a lot of tenants ended up being only large corporate. So other people who cannot afford to pay higher rent, they had to move out of the Hongdae area and to settle down in other areas. So that led to more empty space in Hongdae area. So now we see a lot of empty space in Hongik area. So eventually, these people who left because of higher rent will come back. So it's like a cycle. So once we are done with the placemaking, then you have to move on to another place. So how are we going to make a place? I think that is a really important topic in our time. Another key trend word is the CX. It's customer experience. So large Korean companies, Hyundai Motors, Samsung Electronics, LG Electronics, all the corporate executives are talking about CX. So there are many multiple departments and divisions dealing with the CX within Korean company. So what is CX? I asked a Samsung person, what is the CX to Samsung? What is CX to LG Electronics? They don't know. So but they know that they need to work on the CX because that's what their chairman want. So then for us to understand CX, first we need to understand experience. So experience. There are two ways of translating this word into Korean, 경험 or 체험. So which word is more accurate? I once had a really heated debate about this with the marketing people. Marketing people prefer experience. And for me, it sounds similar, 경험 and 체험. But the marketing people, they think that 체험 is different because it's more like hands-on experience, a sensorial experience. So marketing people prefer 체험. But anyhow, this word actually came up in the 1990s by a famous consulting firms. So consulting firms, they did a lot of consulting services based on this keyword. So customers are important, and customer experience is important, and books are written about it. And then if you look at the book on the left-hand side, the title is Experiential Marketing, published in the 1990s. And another book actually came out with similar title, similar theme, the same year, 1999. So 1999 is the year when experience was written about a lot for marketing purposes. And here on the right-hand side, this is a book that I worked on to translate, and the experiential marketing. You can see that the Korean translation for experience here is 체험. Major publishers in the U.S. They actually go through about 500 different designs to finally decide on the book cover. So I used to live in the U.S. and if I go to bookstores in the U.S. or even nowadays when I go to bookstore in Korea, I see a lot of foreign books, and I first take a look at the book cover. So I look at the book cover, and if I like it, I can reach out for that book. And then I flip through it, and if I like what I see, then I buy it. So the experiential marketing, as I was writing this book, I thought about what image will give us an idea about experience. So for example, this skydiving back then was a very representative image of experience during that period. And other thrilling experiences, for example, a lot of amusement park ride became spread in the world. This is a Vienna in the sky. You can see that there is an advertisement in the internet that this ride or this facility is going to come to your town from which day to which day to so come and enjoy. So you can see this kind of advertisement in the internet. Quite expensive to get on board, about over $300. So I thought about experiencing this. So maybe next time I go to visit a European city, maybe I will look it up if there is a ride nearby. But what I really was curious is, what if I go up there and is enjoying food, but what if I suddenly feel the urge to use the restroom? What happens? Can I come back? Come down to the earth to use the restroom? Can I ask the server to bring me down to use the restroom? So then I was talking about this, and one person in the audience of my lecture actually experienced this. So I asked the person about restroom. So that person's answer is that once you go up, it takes 2 hours to finish the meal. So everyone's asked to use the restroom before they get on board. So during this 2-hour period, once in the sky, there's no way of going down. So you're just stuck there. So that satisfied my curiosity. What about this? So you can spend the night in an accommodation like this. So experience is actually not simple because people want changes. The perpetual novelty is a concept here. So where there cannot exist two identical experience. For example, so I studied in the U.S. for about a decade and then came back to Korea, and then my friends took me to Shilla Hotel, which is a really 5-star hotel in Seoul, and they took me to a Chinese restaurant inside the hotel, and then they treated me to black Chinese noodle, and then it was really yummy. And then I scolded my friends when I was struggling overseas studying. You were enjoying this great food in Korea, and then I came home. And then I couldn't forget about the taste of that black noodle. I couldn't even fall asleep. And then because I wanted to enjoy the taste of it once again, next day I went to the Chinese restaurant in Shilla Hotel again and ordered the same food, and my impression was totally different. I'm paying such a high price for something like this. That was my impression. So the deep impression that I got just previous evening, it doesn't last until the next day. So perpetual novelty is what is actually impossible. So from company's perspective, corporate perspective, it's not possible to give a new experience to their customers that can last perpetually. So companies always have to think about what experience they want to offer next to their customers. So again, going back to these book covers, decades ago, skydiving used to be the epitome of exciting, thrilling experience. But years later, this is another book on customer experience. If you look at the book cover, you feel a change, right? It's much more humble book cover design. And also there's a giant X. So this is actually the current status of experience. So I actually coached about 5 students during their PH course. And even though I am a teacher, still I don't have like concrete, definite answer to what experience is. So I guess if somebody could write a thorough book, systemic book about what experience is, it will be really great. So I was once asked to do a design lecture by a school student. Please come to our school and give us a lecture about design. It was a high school. So I went to that high school and then I met a lot of young high school students. They're very active in asking me questions, so many questions. So I answered their questions and I basically told them that experience is very important. It's going to be more important. So maybe if you could write, if I were your age now, I would write a journal about my experience on the daily basis. What I enjoyed, what I didn't enjoy. So if you keep that kind of journal starting today for the next 10 years, you will end up accumulating a lot of important information and knowledge that could be the basis of your livelihood in the future. So that's basically what I told them. So I think this is the current status of experience. So everyone is just feeling only a certain part of a giant elephant. Nevertheless, there are various research methodologies as to experience. One research methodology is customer experience map. So basically mapping out the experiences by customers. So this is a good example of a customer experience at Starbucks store. So as the customer enters a Starbucks store, what is the trajectory of their experience in that store? So there are some pain points here. What drives you most mad inside Starbucks? What is most frustrating for you when you visit Starbucks? For me, I don't use siren order. I prefer to order to an actual person over the counter. So I go through the menu and then what happens? Somebody comes behind me and just putting silent pressure on me to decide on my menu as quickly as possible, right? And so I decide on a menu and then as I wait for my drink to come up, finally, I have the leisure to thoroughly study what is available on the menu. And also another pain point is it is very hard to find a seat. So waiting and deciding on your menu and finding a seat, finding a table. So those are some of the pain points. So if you solve those pain points, there will be other pain points identified. So you solve them again. So as you go through this cycle, this reiteration, then you can improve the overall customer experience. So you map out those steps in the customer experience at Starbucks. So this is what the picture is about. So for me, from the moment when I enter the Starbucks and then I leave the Starbucks. But nowadays, the customer experience is even more extended, and it starts with the moment when I feel the urge to get a cup of coffee. So the moment of feeling the urge and then looking for a Starbucks store nearby. So that is now part of the customer experience nowadays. So we can see the whole spectrum of customer experience, and this is a customer journey experience map.
요새
And today, the emerging most important stakeholder, the big spenders, would be the the millennials and the Generation Z, and then we also go on to Generation Alpha. So we call them the MZs, and they actually get angry at being grouped together. So maybe there should be Millennial 1 group, Millennial 2 group, and then Gen Z 1, Gen Z 2. So these younger generations, I myself, my second son, is part of the Generation Z. And when I was young, I wasn't taking good care of my hair, and so I was losing my hair later, and then I had to shave my head. And my son, he doesn't want to follow my steps, so I don't stop him from buying really expensive shampoo. And I see that he's using an array of really expensive shampoos, dozens of dollars, and then he tries one, he stops using it, then he tries another one. And then if I go through his leftover shampoo, I can't even go through them in a full year. And when he was traveling back from the States to Korea, I allowed him to use my airline mileage and gave him an upgrade to business class. In my generation, taking the business class is a great luxury. The food, the amenity bag, and the wine, everything. We really preciously carry the bag of amenities. And I remember the question that I first asked him when he came home. Did you bring home the bag of amenities? And he says, no. And I got so angry. Why didn't you bring that? And I yelled at him. I scolded him. But he said, there's cosmetics, not really good. The cosmetics, I don't really use that type. And the pouch itself wasn't really good either. And I just left it. That's what he says. And I was scolding him again. And my wife pulled me aside. And so I followed her into another room. And she says, you don't deserve to be a professor. You don't deserve to be a father, she tells me. And I ask her why. And she says that you like those things because you grew up in the time when our per capita income was less than 1,000, but now we are almost 40,000. And so you shouldn't be looking at him in the way that you are used to when you were growing up. So that's about my experience of the Generation Z, and then how we are going to work with not only the Generation Z, but also the Generation Alpha. So that is going to be a very crucial question we have to answer for the survival and substance of a city. And then, of course, we have the surviving stakeholders, myself, baby boomers. Now we are comfortable financially, and they have enough money to spend. They want to enjoy their lives. How are we going to work with them? That is going to be very important in terms of them being another stakeholder or customer for the city of today. And then we look at the assets of a city. Not only Seoul, but all other cities, including Busan, there would be tangible and intangible assets. And also there would be assets from the perspective of the citizens, and then there will be assets from the perspective of an outsider. So Seoulites, when they come to Busan, they talk about the pork stew restaurants, but Busan locals say that, locals really don't go to those places. And then the tourists would say, then where do you go? Oh, we just go to an ordinary Korean restaurant. And of course, the raw fish restaurants, the ones that are famous among tourists and ones that are famous among locals are different. So internal asset, they might be very different from what are viewed as assets from the outside. And I believe that an urban asset, the asset of a city would be, again, the potential of the city. So we would have something natural, and then we would have something man-made. And these two are connected by people. So this is, from my design perspective, the constellation of the nature, the man-made, and the person. So so we have nature, and then we have man-made. So nature is a design that doesn't need constant modification. But something that is man-made is something that has to be constantly modified in terms of design. So we have nature and the man-made and then human in between, and that is the potential of a city. So to take a different perspective on the potential of a city, we would have things to see, things to do, things to enjoy, and things to learn. So this was the basic concept of the Gwangju Design Biennale. So the mayor of Gwangju wanted to have things to see and things to experience and things to enjoy and things to learn. So that's why I focused on those different categories, the things to see and the things to try and do and things to learn. So in terms of things to see, there are some constant things and temporary things as well. And so I didn't finish that list of things to do in the second block. And things to learn, their historical places and buildings. There's so many things to learn from a certain city. So what would be the assets of the city of Busan? So it has infinite potential as a city. So to do my CI work, the branding of the city, I traveled the city and found that Busan is a city of coexistence. So it's a coexistence of extreme difference. So we have the past and the present and the future together in coexistence. And the entire city, from my viewpoint, is a living museum. We have the cutting-edge technology. We have something from the past. We can see everything from the 1960s to the 2030s. And there are the sophisticated, and there are the rough, and there is order and disorder together. And then there's night and day. Busan is such a different city by night and by day. So when I first came to Busan, I remember what I saw, or what I saw in myself in the daytime and at the nighttime, they were so different. So it's such an attractive city at night in particular. And another keyword for Busan would be convergence. So during the Korean War, it was the temporary capital of the country. And so many people from around the country came down to Busan. So this became the melting pot of South Korea, the miniature of the 8 provinces. And this is also symbolizes openness. It is where the continent ends and also begins. And then United Nations forces had fought in the Korean War, so there was that international participation. So it's a very open city where a lot of things coexist and everything is converged. So as I redid the branding of Busan, I had written a newspaper article calling Busan a city just like a brightly colored bird. It's a constantly evolving city full of colorful allure, and I really like how I phrased it. So it's just like a very brightly colored bird. So unlike Seoul, so Gangdong, north of the river in Seoul, and south of the river Gangnam, is really cut off by the river Han that runs through it. And then, so there's that disconnect. But Busan, in contrast, if you come up from Gimhae, on the left there is a sea, on the right is the mountains, and it's a continuous gradation. So it's a continuum. There's no disconnect. And iridescent. I learned this word just this morning. It means showing luminous colors that seem to change when seen from different angles. So it's an iridescent city with continuous gradation. So the things to see, things to do, and things to learn, I just like to cite some of them as I have seen it. So a thing to see in Busan would be Marine City in Haeundae. You don't really have to go to Singapore to see a beautiful skyline, or Hong Kong for that matter. So in my last trip to Hong Kong, it really wasn't like I remembered it. The one good thing was that whichever restaurant I want to go, you can step in without a reservation. In Marine City in Haeundae, you can see the beauty that you expect to see in Singapore and Hong Kong. And then we have the Kamcheon Cultural Village. Because of a government-funded contest, I was actually one of the judges, and I went to take a look at Kamcheon Cultural Village. So I looked through every nook and cranny of Kamcheon Cultural Village. It was really a village where anyone would want to live. But of course, if there are too many tourists there, then the locals won't be very happy. In Seoul, across the campus, there is the mural village. There used to be a mural village. This was an attraction where Chinese tourists would be dropped off by the busload. And so the locals were not very happy about it because the tourists were swarming the area. So they covered up, they painted over actually the murals. So becoming a popular tourist attraction actually deteriorates the livability of the locals. The Busan Hanok village, you can just imagine so many people there. If you go there, you will feel so stressed because it's just so swarming with tourists. So how are we going to strike a balance? Kamcheon Cultural Village was able to strike that subtle balance, and it is transformed into a place for art and romance. And then we have the Bupyeong Night Market, also known as the Tin Can Market. So you try food, you just browse around. There's so much to see. You step in daytime, and then you lose track of time. And then right next to that, we have the Bosudong bookstore building. So there were so many used bookstores in Seoul, Cheonggyecheon, and now you can see so many books here in the bookstore building in Bosudong, Busan. I remember spending a lot of happy hours there. And then of course, the beaches in Haeundae. That goes without saying. And then just a few days ago, we had the fireworks festival. So to compare the fireworks festival in Seoul, actually, I think the Seoul one's a little bit better because the fireworks are made above the Han River between the buildings, and that's a different spectacle. And then we have the Gwang'an Bridge. There was a lot of people opposing the building of this bridge, but now it's become a very famous landmark. And then we have the Busan Museum of Art and the Museum of Contemporary Art. All of this, when there are good exhibitions there, actually the entire quality of the city is enhanced, and so many people will visit to see these exhibits. So how art galleries are run strategically are going to be very important. And recently, we see a lot of galleries being established around here, and there are, of course, the art fairs that are hosted in Busan, and so many visitors are coming to those.
부산의 최고의
And also, and of course, the sea is the very best thing to see in Busan. So we have a long coast and ocean. And also, Koryo is a steel maker. They turned their wire rope factory into a culture complex. So there is a cafe and library in it, and also Millak Market. I've never seen there yet, but many people recommend this place to me, so I included it my slide. I'd love to visit it someday. And also the Bay 101. So I often talk about the Bay 101 during my lecture, so I guess many people went to visit it. 101 in Korean people's mind is very different from 101 to the Americans. In America, 101 means like the basics of something. For example, introduction to psychology. So usually, if you look at the class code at school, it's psychology 101. So So in America, if somebody says that's just 101, it means it's something basic. So I also went to visit this place, and the Bay 101. Here I could see that in Busan 101 takes a different meaning. It means 100% customer satisfaction is not enough. We should go for 101% customer satisfaction. So I think maybe that is the basics for Busan. So we want to satisfy the customers abundantly. So I guess that's what is implied in the name of this place. And something to eat, food in Busan. I know this is not particularly popular among people in Busan. And there's also 밀면 store in the Hongdae. They also offer really great 밀면 near my school. But again, in Busan, 밀면 is something that we enjoy eating. And again, pork soup and fish, raw fish, sashimi is what we want to eat when we come to visit Busan. And something to learn, things to learn in Busan. So after I got married to my wife, I came to visit Busan about 3 decades ago. And then Taejongdae is a really famous site. So my friends recommended that I come to visit this place. So I looked it up what this place is about. So Taejong is the name of a king during the 신라 dynasty. So the King Taejong used to come here to practice his archery. So that's what this place is about. And the other place is the Haeundae Beach. So again, a very famous scholar, Choi Chi-won, during the unified Shilla dynasty, he came to this beach and was impressed by the beauty of it. And we also have the United Nations Memorial Cemetery. This is the only United Nations Memorial Cemetery in the world. So this is a really unique cultural heritage to Busan. And also, this is the old military campsite during the Joseon dynasty. So in a nutshell, Busan has so many urban assets. Yet, the best asset that Busan has is the Busan people, who are known for their passion. So they might look a bit stoic at the first glance, the first impression, but they're very passionate and they're very warm-hearted people. So people in Busan, they really have a lot of affection for you once you really get to know them, and they extend such kindness and hospitality to you. So I think Busan people are the best kind of people. Then, with all these kind of infinite potentials, what are the homework or task for Busan? We need to reconcile coexistence and convergence. The harmony is important. Sometimes we find something that's tricky to develop, but also tricky to just leave as it is. And if we are going to do something about this or this place, what are we going to change? What are we going to add to it? So it's an important topic for Busan. How are we going to achieve balance and reconciliation or harmony? And also, so Busan has a really long-lasting heritage, long-lasting assets from old times. And also, what about our assets that began in a more modern, contemporary time? What about the assets that we are planning to build? How are we going to strike a balance and harmony among these different types of assets that come from different times in history? So that's something that we need to resolve going forward.
의 하나가 저는 디자인.
And one of the tasks that we have to fulfill would be design. So please answer this question very quickly. Don't think and speak it out loud, please. So please answer out loud this question within 1 second. So who do you think of when you think of designer? Not myself. Who is it? The designer that you most first think of.
디자인하면 떠오르는 사람.
Which designer do you remember most? So we had multiple answers. I believe that everyone, most Koreans, think Andre Kim. So according to unofficial statistics, 2/3 of Korean people, if we ask them, come up with a name for a designer, they always come up with Andre Kim. So yes, he was a very excellent designer. But the design community actually suffered thanks to him. Because the chairman of the conglomerates always think of Andre Kim, but their designs are very different from those of Andre Kim's. So it leads to an identity crisis. So how are we going to move beyond Andre Kim's design? Fortunately enough, the young students at Hong-ik Design School, Art School, some of them don't know Andre Kim. We believe that they are our future. They will. So if we are able to persevere until they are now established in the higher echelons of society, then there will be a future for Korean design. Nevertheless, it's a very large discourse when you're trying to define art or design. So Herbert Simon is an economist, and in his book, The Sciences of the Artificial, he defined design as a process. So to design is to devise courses of action aimed at changing existing situations into preferred ones. So in other words, the existing situation is to be changed into a preferred one through courses of action. So it's about making things better than they are right now. That entire process is design, according to Herbert Simon. So if I go ask the same question in other countries, of course, nobody wants to worsen something. They all want to better something. They always strive to make something better. No one is aiming to worsen something. So in that same sense, everyone are designers. Everyone is designing in whatever they do. And that is, again, a quote from not myself, but the Nobel Prize laureate, Herbert Simon. And in design, of course, communication is a very important theme, and that's also the theme of this World Humanities Forum. So communication is about sharing. But how to share? You have to understand the other to be able to share with them. So this year, I've been married 38 years, and at least once a week, my wife always tells me, "You still don't understand me. You still don't get me." And to be honest, I don't get the word get or understand. And then how would I understand you? That's how I reply. And then she said, "Don't play with words. You're such a professor." But when you look at the word understand in English, I suddenly could see what it meant. So I always say that I overstand my wife. Now you have to place yourself underneath the person that you're trying to understand. You have to, as a professor, I have to place myself lower than my students to understand them, and it's very difficult actually to do that. You have to have empathy to be able to actually do that. When I came back to Korea, when I first humiliated myself in front of my students with the word empathy. So the word sympathy and empathy comes up so often in design books, and the definitions, they seemed pretty much like the same thing to me, so I confused them. And one of my students asked me, "Because you studied overseas, can I ask you this question?" "Then go ahead," I said. "How is empathy different from sympathy?" And I smiled to myself. They're spelled differently. I thought they actually meant the same thing, that were just different words. But then I studied a little bit more, and I found that sympathy and empathy are different as night and day. So in English, sympathy means it's put in a phrase as I feel bad for something, while empathy, I feel bad with something. So in early March, late February each year, there are students who always have a broken leg. They had perhaps a snowboarding or skiing accident and they have to use crutches. And I tell them that they should have been careful, their parents would be worried. And to myself, I tell myself that I knew you'd have that kind of accident. But one day, my son who went snowboarding for the first time called home. And he says that he has broken his left arm snowboarding. And my wife didn't sleep that night at all. And then she drove over to Yongpyeong to pick him up. And then it was so hard to drive. I mean, actually, I was driving, and I saw him in the hotel room, and I felt like my own arms were broken. And my wife says that her heart felt torn like 5 centimeters, and that is what empathy is about. So you have to have that empathy to place you underneath the other person, to understand them, have empathy, and really communicate with them. So in designing, how are we going to place us underneath the client? How are we going to empathize with their pain point? And how are we going to address that pain point? That's what is stressed in design. And there are so many assets of Busan, but when we're talking about design, visualization is needed. Things that are invisible have to be made visible, and things that are intangible have to be made tangible. Those two are the most important functions of design. So how strategically are we going to make this happen for Busan? So that is the challenge that we have to come up or live up to. So I believe that design is a means that makes all people happier. So the long-standing challenge of design is whether it's going to be good to look at or good to use. Because I'm an ergonomics major, because I studied human engineering, I'm always focused on making something good to use. So at technology institutes, at corporates, they sometimes ask me to give a lecture and stress that this is good to use in front of their president. But if I am invited by a design institute to give a lecture, they ask me to stress that something is nice to look at. But today, the requirement is that attractive things work better. That is the current status. So around 30 years ago, Japanese psychologists had an experiment. All of the buttons, all of the functions were exactly the same in 2 devices. One was pretty to look at, and one was ugly. And the people who use the attractive device statistically, significantly found it better usability than the ugly attractive. So they went to an American conference on design and said that attractive things work better. And the Americans didn't believe them. We can't accept that. It just looks different on the outside. The features are same, but the only thing that's different is how it looks like. And it might be something that's only culturally unique to Japan. And then that research was really disregarded. But a few years later, Israelis did a similar research. They did a similar experiment, and they found there was more significant difference. And they presented this in the U.S. as well, and Americans totally accepted it. They wholeheartedly accepted it, and they made use of this in corporate culture. They wanted to make the lives of the employees a little more happier by making their work environment more attractive. And this is because when people see attractive things, it makes them feel good. And this leads to a positive emotion state. And when you're in a positive emotion state, it widens the scope of your thinking. You become more generous and open-minded. So what time do you go to your superior to get a sign-off? That's when the secretary, the assistant, the personal assistant, places a phone call to you and says that you have to come up right now because the boss is really feeling good right now. You shouldn't really go to the boss to get an approval when they're in a bad mood. And of course, my students also come to me to get approval when I'm in a good mood. But today, more recently, my students, when I'm in a bad mood and they have to get permission from me or an approval, then they will slowly slip over a chocolate. And as soon as I have that chocolate, of course, I feel better, and then I approve whatever they want approved them and send them off. So you get more open-minded, you get more generous when you're in a positive state of mind. So you're less critical. You are more open to the different possibilities. And so the person who's trying to gain approval is able to get what they want, and it also leads to better usability because the user is more open to different possibilities. And then there is the visceral design and behavioral design and reflective design that was mentioned by the scholar. And visceral means from the gut, so it's instinctive. The shape or the color or the texture and the finish, what you feel the moment you encounter something. So if the visceral design is not satisfactory, then you can't go over to behavioral design and reflective design. So many designs are rejected at this visceral design stage. So it has to give a positive emotion to the person as soon as they see it. If not, it's going to be a failure. So the success of a city and design of the city. So I believe that design for innovation. So innovation is something we call that provides really overwhelmingly a strong value. And design is the best effective tool for that. Corporates have placed design at the forefront of their innovation strategy for a long while now because it's the most cost-efficient, most time-efficient, and most effective tool. So that's why CEOs are calling for design. So you spend a lot of money, you spend a lot of time, and if it doesn't come out to anything, then the bosses won't be happy. So cities also have to make design a very important means for their innovation. Busan is good. So we have to turn Busan is good into Busan is good thanks to design or by design. So I hope that Busan becomes a better city, a more attractive and a more livable city thanks to design. And on that note, I close my presentation. So I wanted to stretch this out a little longer, but I actually have finished within an hour. Maybe I was looking to go over about 10 minutes. Thank you.
네, 질의응답 시간을.
So now we are going to take questions from the audience. Well, as I was listening to lecture, I thought of the design. I loved New York, and I really like that design. By my favorite designer, Milton Glenn. And so design, with this new design in the world, now the city has more identity and helps other people to love the city more, and also it can build empathy and solidarity. So it's a good example of good design, building these emotions. So if you have a question, raise your hand. Our staff will hand over a microphone to you. So do we have a question?
네, 가운데에.
Yes, in the middle.
발표하는 사람이 여러 가지 일을 해야 됩니다.
Many jobs that I have today, not just to give a lecture. Thank you very much for your lecture. Well, not a question. I have a request to you, if I may. So there is a town called Bomildong in Busan. There used to be many theaters, movie theaters. There's Hamil Theater, Bomin Theater. So when Korea was going through rapid economic development, there are many footwear factories in this area. So workers at the footwear factories, once they got off work, they would go to see a movie in this movie theater. This theater in this area is now closed down. Closed down a long time ago. Now there's something called the Fashion Business Center in this area. I went there recently, but the Boning Theater is completely gone. So it was regrettable for me to see that. So if we had left that theater, at least some part of it, it might have been great. So I believe that going forward, we have to think about what to do with our heritage. Thank you very much for your comment. In Seoul as well. So sometimes I would skip school or class to go to see the premiere of the James Bond movie, and you'd get the ticket in the black market. And if you go to the movie theater, many people were lining up. But now things are changed in that district. Movie theater districts is now different in Seoul as well. But in Seoul also there is a famous neighborhood where a lot of movie theaters used to be. Many of the movie theaters are closed down and gone in Seoul too. So I feel the same feeling when I go back to visit this area in Seoul. So many people actually raise this issue and they make the same comment. But we need a consensus building, but it also takes time to build a consensus about how to keep the cultural heritage and what to leave behind. So, and also go to some traditional market in Korea changes, and also the market changes. As the market changes and people need to find a new source of business. So if you cannot do that, it's regrettable. Schools change as well, but even if schools change, students need to stay smart. So they need to know what to learn and what kind of take for their benefits. So as I was staying in Busan for a few days, one day I was crossing the road and the car didn't stop for me to cross over. And then my wife actually, right before my trip, she told me to be careful of cars on the road. And then I realized why she was giving me such an advice. But now that I was experiencing Busan drivers and Busan cars, I realized that she was right. So.
예, 교수님 강의 좀.
Thank you so much for that lecture, Professor. So we believe that there are two sides to design, an ambiguity or two sides to design. So a good design will enhance the value, but it might actually damage the value of something if it is designed in a bad way. So I'm a researcher on marine spaces. And there's a 3 trillion won project taking place to develop the seashore by the government. And of course, the government places emphasis on the design. But if it's a fishing town, there's a lot of history, there's a lot of natural aspects. All of them have to be taken into consideration. But the designers who come there to work on the project, they should actually immerse themselves in that area for at least 1 week, the bare minimum. But they try to work on the project after just experiencing that town for 1 day. So I believe that is something that should be addressed in a better way by the designing community. And second of all, about design, to enhance the value of Busan, we were thinking about the things to see and things to enjoy. So we really should focus our designing energies on the places that will move and emotionally engage the visitors. And we have to enhance those areas. And third of all, if you go to Haeundae, a lot of people, a lot of tourists come and get a tan on the beach. But you haven't really experienced Haeundae if you haven't seen the sunrise and the sunset. And you were talking earlier about the marine city, but actually in the Dalmaji Hill, the moon viewing hill, there's a very old restaurant where you can see the Gwangan Bridge, the Dongbek Island, and the Haeundae beach. So that restaurant could be a very good viewing point. And they sell radish noodles and rice wine, makgeolli. So you should enjoy the sunset and also enjoy the night scenery while enjoying that kind of food. So someone who understands those attractions should engage them in their design. And so we should make better use of the assets that are already there. What are your thoughts? Yes, I fully agree. So people who just spend a night and day there and say that they can provide better design, they're really mistaken. So in Jeju, I love the design for the public facilities. Most of the designs were provided by firms from Seoul. So there were a lot of lighting systems set up, just like they are in Seoul. But you know, rain falls vertically in Seoul. But in Jeju, rain actually moves in a different direction. It hits the floor and bounces back up. And so this really damaged the lighting fixtures. So if you don't understand the environment, the local environment, and you're trying to provide a design, it's really a bad way to approach design. And as I mentioned earlier, understanding the other, empathy and communication, that was not attained in that bad design. So you'll have to hire a very competent designer instead of a bad designer. So last week I went to the World Design Assembly. I went to the General Assembly and I was appointed as director. So there were 180 people from 129 countries, and we were speaking about 3 keywords. One is the role of design and generative AI. How are we going to make use of generative AI in design? That was the first issue. And the second was sustainability. How are we going to make the limited resources of Earth in a more sustainable way? How are we going to use them in a more sustainable way? And third is the next generation. How are we going to pass on design and how to teach design to the next generation? Those were the 3 important agenda items. And the same way, so the quality and the number of designs are so concentrated in Seoul. How are we going to balance that out across the country? That's a very important question that we have to answer. And there are really good universities in Busan as well. The graduate schools of design also have to be very strong in Busan, but we see that so many aspiring design students come over to Hongik University. And so we are growing the size of the graduate school. And so this imbalance, this is bad for Seoul and bad for Busan as well. So how are we going to better educate and teach design to the next generation? That's a challenge that we have to meet. Another point here is that the decision makers, we really have to have them have better taste. There's a saying in the design community. So a chairman has built a company and then he passes it over to his next generation, his son. And then that son, he reduced the CI. He changes the logo of the company, tries to provide new things for the company. And the design firm will bring it up and report it to the chairman. But the chairman gets really angry. And if the chairman rejects a design, if he gets really angry, then designers say that that's a really good design. But if the chairman is satisfied with the design, then designers say that it's actually a failure in design. So an important point in design community is to, through education, trying to better and enhance the taste of the decision makers. So it's very important for the general public to have enhanced taste in design. I really encourage you to go to galleries and art shows and really take a good look at everything there. Please reach out to the docent. What kind of work is this? What's the value in this? What's so good about this? And you learn more, and then you will get better taste, a more discerning eye, and then you will be able to tell which is a bad piece of art, a bad piece of design. So that is a role that designers have to play, and also the decision makers also have to play. So among the many options that are provided to the decision maker, the decision makers have to choose one of the options. Don't ask the designer to try to combine two designs. The decision maker has to choose just one, and if not, it will turn out really, really absurd. And thank you so much for that very meaningful comment. Thank you so much for those questions and comments.
마무리해야 될 것 같습니다.
So in the interest of time, we will have to close this session. I actually saw a hand up there. We will just take, one more question.
저는 박물관학 전
I actually studied museum studies, and also I'm from Busan, so I'm a Busan person, but I was not born in Busan, but still I consider myself a Busan person, so I don't know what should be the definition of Busan person, but anyhow. So thanks to your lecture, I was able to get an overview of what design is, so I've been attending this forum for 3 days, and this is the last keynote lecture. And this thought came to my mind as I was experiencing this forum. So I'm a Busan person. As a Busan person, what should I let the visitors know about Busan? And one of the things that you mentioned, I think 2 things are missing from your lecture. For example, movie and also Bexco. The movie hall, the movie district in Busan is very famous, and also Bexco as well. But Bexco, there are many other similar facilities like Bexco all over cities in the world. But beach as well, beach, coast is what we have in Busan. And also there are a lot of ships. And also a lot of places that are called dae. It's like basically Taejongdae and many other places with the word dae at the end of the place name. Basically means it's a beachfront area. And also we need to improve our design, but we need to have a better eye for better design. But on top of that, I believe that if designers and design teachers like yourself, if they also need to improve as well. The reason why I'm saying is that because it seems like you have a deep connection with the Busan, and you can come back to live here. So that is why I'm making this comment. Thank you very much for your comment. So the movie hall, 영화의 전당, I wanted to talk about that during my lecture, but I couldn't quite find the right image for that. So I apologize for leaving that out. But author Ben Wilson, who wrote Metropolis, he said that the cities are the greatest human invention. So today we heard a great lecture about design, placemaking, and empathy through reconciliation. So why don't we give him a warm round of applause for his wonderful lecture. Shortly, we are going to have a closing ceremony where there's going to be a musical performance. Thank you very much.
네, 여러분, 제7회 세계 인문학 포럼 이제 끝을 향해 가고 있습니다. 이제 폐회식이 이어질 예정인데요.
Now we are nearing the